What if two tiny lives were joined together, and every doctor said separation was too dangerous, too risky to even try? Imagine spending months in a single body that wasn't meant to be shared, knowing that every heartbeat, every breath was a battle just to survive. Then picture the moment when surgeons walked into the operating room and said they would attempt the impossible, an 18-hour surgery to separate conjoined twins who had been inseparable since birth. Will they make it through alive? Stay with us until the end, because what happens next will shock you. What if two tiny lives were joined together and every doctor said separation was too dangerous, too risky to even try? From the moment these twins were born, the world seemed stacked against them. Their parents had been told during pregnancy that their daughters were conjoined, and the chances of survival were slim. Yet, against all odds, they entered the world alive, fragile, but breathing. Every day became a test of patience, courage, and love. For months, the family lived in fear, watching their little girls share one body, one destiny, and one uncertain future. Doctors warned them that surgery would be one of the most dangerous procedures imaginable, and many refused to even consider it. But then, a team of specialists stepped forward and promised to attempt the impossible, a marathon 18-hour operation that could change everything. The parents were terrified, but they also knew that without this surgery, their daughters might never live a full life. They wanted them to run, to play, to experience the world as individuals, not trapped in a shared struggle. Imagine being told that your children's only chance at freedom lies in the hands of dozens of surgeons, each decision carrying life or death consequences. That's exactly what this family faced. The risk of losing one or both was painfully real. Yet hope burned brighter than fear, and preparations began for what would become a surgery unlike anything most of us could imagine. In the hospital, the tension was electric. More than 30 doctors and nurses from around the world gathered to plan every detail. Months of scans, simulations, and practice sessions prepared them for the moment when time would stop and skill alone would decide the outcome. The parents held their daughters close the night before, whispering prayers through tears, knowing tomorrow might be their last goodbye. It was a scene no mother or father should ever face, but one that demanded faith beyond reason. This story isn't just about science or medicine. It's about miracles, courage, and the unbreakable bond of family. It's about what happens when love refuses to give up even when the odds seem impossible. And that's why you need to stay with us until the very end, because what happened inside that operating room will leave you speechless. You'll see triumph, heartbreak, and a twist so powerful that it will change the way you look at life forever. Before we continue, if stories like this inspire you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. It helps us share more real miracles with the world, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Trust me, every second of this journey matters. As the operating room doors closed, silence fell over the hospital. Monitors beeped steadily, surgeons adjusted their masks, and the marathon began. Minute by minute, hour by hour, they carefully worked to separate what nature had fused together. The first cuts were precise, guided by months of planning. Every heartbeat was monitored, every move rehearsed in advance. The stakes were overwhelming, but there was no turning back. Could they really pull off the impossible? Could these two little girls finally live as individuals, free and whole? The answer is coming, but only if you stay with us until the very end, because what unfolds in the next chapters is a journey through fear, faith, and ultimately a miracle that will touch your soul. Don't blink. This is just the beginning. From the moment the twins were born, their story captured the attention of everyone around them. The hospital staff had never seen such a rare case before, and the parents quickly became surrounded by whispers of doubt. Could these babies really survive beyond a few weeks? At first, Even breathing was a challenge, and every doctor who entered their room carried a look of quiet concern. Yet day after day, the twins kept fighting. Their cries grew stronger, their eyes brighter, and their bond unbreakable. It was clear they were not ready to give up, and neither were their parents. The family spent sleepless nights searching for hope, traveling from clinic to clinic, desperately seeking a doctor who would take on the challenge. Most specialists shook their heads, warning that the risks of surgery outweighed any chance of success. Some advised against even trying. But their parents refused to accept defeat. They wanted their daughters to have more than a life confined to hospital rooms and medical equipment. They dreamed of a future where the girls could walk separately, laugh separately, and live freely. That dream gave them the strength to keep going, no matter how impossible it seemed. Then, finally, they found a team willing to attempt what others had called unthinkable. 30 specialists from across the globe joined forces, bringing their expertise in pediatric surgery, neurology, and anesthesiology. They began months of preparation, creating 3D models of the twins' shared anatomy, running endless simulations, and rehearsing every possible scenario. Nothing was left to chance. Each surgeon knew that a single mistake could cost not just one, but 2 precious lives. This was not just medicine. This was a battle between despair and possibility. As the surgery date approached, the hospital transformed into a command center. Meetings were held daily, strategies were revised, and every tool was tested again and again. The parents watched all of this with a mixture of awe and terror. On one hand, they felt gratitude for the dedication of these professionals. On the other, they knew the truth. Even the most skilled doctors could not guarantee success. The outcome was still uncertain, and the fear of loss hung over them like a storm cloud. The night before the operation, the parents sat by their daughter's bed, holding their tiny hands as if they could somehow transfer strength through touch. They whispered promises, telling them to fight, telling them to be brave. The twins, though too young to understand, smiled faintly, as if responding to their love. It was a moment frozen in time, parents facing the possibility of heartbreak, yet clinging to hope with every ounce of their souls. As dawn broke, the hospital halls filled with quiet footsteps. Nurses prepared the room, surgeons reviewed their notes one last time, and the air grew heavy with anticipation. The twins were placed gently on a stretcher, surrounded by machines that beeped softly like a countdown to destiny. Their parents walked alongside, refusing to let go until the very last moment. Tears streamed down their faces, but so did their determination. They had chosen hope, no matter the cost. Before we go further, if you believe in miracles and the power of human courage, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Every click helps us share more stories of faith and resilience, and trust me, you will not want to miss what happens next. As the operation room doors opened, the sight was breathtaking. Dozens of doctors stood ready, wearing masks, gloves, and expressions of absolute focus. The atmosphere was like a battlefield before the first shot, calm, intense, and filled with unspoken resolve. The twins were wheeled inside, and the doors slowly closed behind them. For their parents, this was the longest goodbye they had ever experienced. Would their daughters return to them alive and whole? Or would this be the last time they saw them together? The operating room was unlike anything most people will ever see. More than 30 doctors and nurses stood in carefully assigned positions, each role rehearsed countless times. The air was cool, filled with the steady rhythm of monitors and the soft hum of machines. At the center of it all lay the twins, so small and fragile against the vastness of the surgical theater. Lights beamed down on them, illuminating the tiny bodies that had been inseparable since the moment of birth. This was the moment everyone had been preparing for, the point of no return. The lead surgeon raised his eyes, scanning the team. Every gaze reflected focus and determination. With a nod, he gave the signal. The room fell silent, almost sacred as the first incision was made. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Every hand was steady, every movement precise. The first cut was just the beginning of what would become an 18-hour battle between life and death. Every heartbeat of those little girls echoed in the ears of everyone present. Losing focus for even a second could mean tragedy. Hours passed, yet to the parents waiting outside, it felt like eternity. They sat huddled together, holding hands so tightly their knuckles turned white. Each tick of the clock carried the weight of uncertainty. Nurses entered occasionally to update them, but the news was always the same. They're still working. That phrase was both comforting and terrifying. It meant their daughters were alive, but it also meant the hardest parts were yet to come. Inside the room, the surgeons faced challenges they anticipated, but feared. The girls shared vital blood vessels and organs that had to be separated with surgical precision. Every millimeter mattered. Surgeons worked in teams, taking shifts, yet no one allowed fatigue to break their concentration. Sweat formed under their masks, and the atmosphere grew more intense with each step forward. The complexity of the operation was staggering. One wrong move, and the outcome could be irreversible. To keep the atmosphere calm, music played softly in the background. But even that couldn't mask the tension. The anesthesiologist monitored every vital sign with hawk-like precision, calling out numbers in steady voices. Their job was to keep both girls alive and stable through a process that was stretching beyond the limits of the human body. Each successful milestone was a small victory, but each new stage brought fresh dangers. Back in the waiting room, the parents whispered prayers under their breath, clinging to memories of their daughter's laughter, their tiny smiles, and the dream of one day watching them take their first steps apart. At times, the mother broke into tears, while the father tried to remain strong, though his trembling hands betrayed his fear. Every moment was agony. 6 hours in, the team made a breakthrough. One of the most complex shared vessels was successfully separated without complication. A wave of relief washed over the room, but no one dared to celebrate yet. They knew many more hours and countless risks still lay ahead. The operation was like climbing a mountain without knowing if the summit was even reachable. As the hours dragged on, exhaustion set in. Yet no one dared to let their guard down. The stakes were simply too high. Some doctors stepped back to rest, while others stepped in, but the focus remained absolute. This was more than medicine. It was a fight for life, a chance to rewrite destiny itself. Before we move forward, if you are still watching, take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe. Your support helps us share more powerful stories like this one. And trust me, what comes next is going to test the very limits of hope. At the 12-hour mark, the parents received word that the final and most dangerous stage of the operation was about to begin. This was the moment that could determine everything. One miscalculation, one slip, and years of preparation would end in heartbreak. The room grew silent once again as the surgeons prepared to take on the most delicate part of the entire procedure. What happened in those final 6 hours would push everyone to the edge and change the course of 2 lives forever. Stay with us, because the miracle was only just beginning. As the operation entered its 12th hour, fatigue weighed heavily on the surgical team, but no one dared to show weakness. The most delicate stage had arrived, and every surgeon in the room knew the truth. Everything they had accomplished so far would mean nothing if they failed in these final hours. The twins' lives now hung by the thinnest of threads. Their parents, waiting just outside, clutched one another in silence, praying for strength they could not see but desperately hoped was there. Inside the operating room, the atmosphere was different now. The earlier rhythm of steady movements had given way to moments of sharp tension and whispered instructions. The twins shared vital organs that required a separation more complex than anything attempted before. Every millimeter of tissue carried a risk. Surgeons leaned over, sweat dripping beneath their protective gear, voices low but precise. The anesthesiologist called out numbers with urgency, monitoring oxygen levels and heartbeats that wavered dangerously close to collapse. Time felt like it was slipping through their hands. At hour 13, alarms blared. One of the girls' blood pressure plummeted. Nurses rushed to adjust machines, doctors froze for a split second, then sprang into action. Every heart in the room seemed to stop with her fragile pulse. Would they lose her? A transfusion was initiated, medications were administered, and after what felt like an eternity, her vitals slowly stabilized. Relief swept the room, but it was short-lived. Everyone knew that another crisis could come at any second. Meanwhile, the parents outside felt their own torment grow unbearable. They had not seen their daughters in half a day. Every sound from the hallway made them jump. When a nurse finally came with an update, her face was calm, but her words were heavy. The surgeons are in the most difficult part now. Please, keep praying. Those words broke them, and they sank to their knees, holding hands, begging for a miracle. Back inside, the surgeons pressed forward. At hour 15, the final stage of organ separation began. Years of study, practice, and simulation boiled down to these moments. The lead surgeon gave instructions in a steady but tense voice, guiding his colleagues through the critical steps. Scalpels glided carefully, clamps were adjusted with microscopic precision, and every eye in the room followed each movement. This was not just surgery, it was choreography at the edge of human possibility. Then, at hour 16, another complication struck. Oxygen saturation dropped dangerously low. The anesthesiology team worked furiously, adjusting tubes, checking connections, fighting to keep both girls alive. For a moment, it seemed that the surgery might end in tragedy, but the team refused to surrender. With quick interventions and unrelenting determination, they pulled the numbers back up. The crisis passed, but the room was now soaked in sweat and tension. Hour 17 arrived, and the end was finally in sight. The surgeons began the final steps, separating tissue that had bound the girls together since birth. Everyone in the room held their breath as the last connection was carefully cut. Then, silence. The lead surgeon looked up, his voice breaking through the quiet. They are separated. A wave of emotion swept the room. Some doctors quietly cheered, others closed their eyes in silent gratitude, and a few even wiped tears from behind their masks. But the battle was not over. Both girls were now individuals, but incredibly fragile. They still needed to be stabilized, stitched, and monitored before the surgery could truly be called a success. Nurses rushed to cover them, surgeons worked to ensure no bleeding remained, and every monitor beeped steadily like a fragile promise. The parents had no idea yet that the miracle they had prayed for had just happened. As the 18th hour drew to a close, the surgical team prepared to wheel the twins out of the operating room. Their bodies were separated, but their fight for life was far from finished. Outside, their parents stood trembling, waiting for news that could either shatter their world or bring them the greatest joy of their lives. Stay with us, because in the next chapter, you'll see the moment these parents finally hear the words they've been waiting for, and the emotional explosion that follows will leave you in tears. 18 hours after the first incision, the doors of the operating room finally opened. For nearly a full day, the parents had sat in silence, whispering prayers, clinging to hope, and fearing the worst. They had aged years in a matter of hours, every tick of the clock echoing like thunder in their hearts. When the lead surgeon stepped out into the hallway, his mask pulled down to reveal a tired but steady smile, time seemed to stop. The mother leapt to her feet, her heart pounding, while the father's hands shook uncontrollably. This was the moment that would define the rest of their lives. The surgeon spoke slowly, as if to give weight to each word. Your daughters are separated. They are alive. For a moment, silence filled the air. The parents could not comprehend the miracle they had just heard. Then, in an instant, the mother collapsed into tears, covering her face with trembling hands. The father grabbed the surgeon's hands, clinging to him as if holding onto life itself. Relief, joy, and disbelief collided all at once. The impossible had been done. Their daughters had survived. But the surgeon's voice grew serious. They are stable, but very weak. The next few hours will be critical. It was a reminder that while the separation was successful, the battle for survival was not yet over. Still, the words "alive and separated" echoed in their minds, a phrase they had dreamed of hearing for months. They clung to that hope, unwilling to let fear overshadow the miracle that had just unfolded. When the parents were finally allowed into the recovery room, the sight before them was almost too much to bear. Each of their daughters lay in her own hospital bed, surrounded by tubes, monitors, and machines. For the first time in their lives, the girls were apart. The mother wept as she leaned over each bed, kissing tiny foreheads, whispering words of love and encouragement. The father stood by, his eyes overflowing with tears, his hand pressed against the glass of the incubators as if he could shield them from any harm. The room was filled with the rhythmic beeping of machines, but beneath it all was a silence that carried deep meaning. For the first time, the twins were individuals. Fragile, yes. Vulnerable, absolutely. But free. Their parents felt a wave of gratitude so powerful that words seemed inadequate. They thanked the doctors, the nurses, and above all, the stranger who had given them hope when so many others had said no. Meanwhile, the medical team was not celebrating just yet. The hours following such a massive operation were critical. The twins needed to prove that their bodies could sustain themselves independently. Every monitor was watched closely, every fluctuation recorded with precision. The parents barely slept, standing guard over their daughters, whispering prayers through tears. Each small breath, each heartbeat felt like a victory. And then came the moment that broke them all. One of the twins opened her eyes. It was only for a second, a tiny flicker of awareness, but it was enough to send the room into tears. The mother cried out softly, clutching her hand. Minutes later, her sister followed, her tiny eyes blinking at the unfamiliar world she now inhabited, alone. The nurses smiled behind their masks, the doctors nodded quietly, and the parents embraced in pure joy. They had dreamed of this moment, and now it was real. Before we continue, if this story has touched your heart, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more miracle stories like this one to the world, and what happens next is something you absolutely do not want to miss. As the night fell and the hospital grew quiet, the parents remained at their daughter's side. They knew the road ahead would be long, filled with therapy, monitoring, and challenges they couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time, they could dream of a future where their daughters would run, play, and live as separate individuals. The impossible had been achieved, but the journey was far from over. Stay with us, because in the next chapter, you'll witness the world's reaction to this incredible story and how these two little girls became a symbol of hope across the globe. News of the successful surgery spread like wildfire. Within hours, headlines around the world declared the impossible. Conjoined twins successfully separated after 18 hours in surgery. Television stations broke into regular programming to share the story. Newspapers printed special editions, and social media erupted with millions of messages of love, prayer, and hope. Strangers who had never met the family posted photos of candles, handwritten notes, and drawings made by children who wanted the twins to know they were loved. The world had been waiting for this moment, and now they were united in celebration. For the parents, it was surreal. Just months before, they had been told by specialists that the surgery would almost certainly fail. They had sat in tiny offices, holding hands and crying as one doctor after another shook their head and suggested preparing for the worst. But now, the same world that had doubted them was cheering them on. Reporters camped outside the hospital, eager for updates. Crowds gathered, holding signs with messages like, "Miracles do happen," and "Stay strong, little angels." It was as if the entire planet had become part of their extended family. Inside the hospital, the staff couldn't help but feel the wave of support. Nurses received letters of gratitude from people they had never met. Doctors were praised as heroes, though many insisted they were simply doing their duty. Still, they knew they had been part of something extraordinary. This was more than a surgery. It was a message to the world that courage, faith, and love could achieve the unthinkable. The twins, still fragile in their separate beds, became symbols of resilience. Every photo shared by the family, every tiny smile captured by a nurse's camera went viral. The world followed their every breath, their every step toward recovery. Children who had faced illness wrote letters saying they felt braver because of the twins. Parents of sick children found new hope. Entire communities organized prayer vigils and charity events in their honor. It was as if the story had breathed new life into the idea of miracles. Yet, behind the overwhelming support, the parents carried quiet fears. They knew the hardest part was not behind them, but just beginning. Recovery would be long, and complications could arise at any moment. They prayed not to be blinded by the glow of worldwide attention, but to stay focused on their daughter's fragile journey. Still, the encouragement from strangers gave them strength. Each letter, each prayer, each smile reminded them that they were not alone. The hospital eventually released an official statement. "We are proud to announce that the separation of the conjoined twins was successful. Both children are stable and recovering under close supervision. We ask the world to continue to keep them in their thoughts and prayers." The announcement was met with cheers across the globe. News anchors spoke with tears in their eyes, and social media platforms exploded with celebratory posts. The world had been hungry for good news, and these two little girls had delivered it. The parents, overwhelmed by the attention, recorded a short message from the hospital room. With tears streaming down their faces, they said, "Thank you to everyone who believed in us when hope seemed lost. Thank you to the doctors, to the stranger who gave us this chance, and to every person around the world who has prayed for our daughters. We cannot wait for you to see them grow, live, and thrive." The video spread instantly, viewed by millions within hours. If this incredible moment has inspired you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Stories like this remind us that miracles are real, and your support helps us share them with the world. And trust me, you will want to stay until the very end, because the next chapter reveals something about the twins' journey that nobody expected. The miracle was no longer just for the family. It belonged to the world. The twins had become a global symbol of perseverance, hope, and love. But while millions celebrated, the doctors quietly reminded everyone, the fight isn't over yet. Their words carried weight, because what lay ahead could make the difference between survival and tragedy. The question now was, would the world's miracle hold strong in the face of the challenges to come? Stay with us, because the next chapter reveals the answer. After weeks in intensive care, the day everyone had prayed for finally arrived. The twins were cleared to leave the hospital. Cameras flashed, reporters filled the sidewalks, and strangers cheered as the family stepped outside, holding their daughters in their arms for the very first time as individuals. But behind the smiles and celebration was a reality that the family knew all too well. This was only the beginning of a long, grueling road. Once home, the parents quickly discovered that caring for two recovering infants was a challenge beyond imagination. Every hour was filled with medication schedules, feeding routines, physical therapy exercises, and sleepless nights spent watching monitors to ensure their daughters were breathing properly. Their tiny bodies bore the scars of the surgery, a permanent reminder of the battle they had endured. Each scar was both a mark of survival and a warning of the struggles ahead. Doctors had explained that recovery would be a marathon, not a sprint. Each twin required her own team of specialists, pediatric surgeons, physical therapists, nutritionists, and even child psychologists. Every appointment came with uncertainty. Would their bodies adapt to functioning independently? Would complications arise? Could they ever live fully normal lives? These were questions that haunted the parents day and night. Financially, the family was overwhelmed. Even with global donations and support from charities, the cost of long-term care threatened to crush them. Bills piled up on the kitchen table, each envelope a reminder of how fragile their new life was. Yet every time they felt fear rising, they only had to look at their daughters, alive, breathing, and separate, to remember why it was worth every sacrifice. Emotionally, the parents struggled with exhaustion, but they refused to give in. They celebrated each small victory. The first time one of the girls moved her arms independently. The first time her sister sat up without support. The laughter that filled their home after months of tears. These milestones, insignificant to most, were life-changing for them. Every giggle, every smile was proof that the miracle was real. But challenges remained. The twins' bodies were still fragile, and even a simple cold could become dangerous. Nights were filled with worry, and days with endless medical routines. Sometimes the parents felt as though they had traded one battle for another. Yet their determination never wavered. They were fighting for a future where their daughters could run, play, and live freely. And then came the breakthrough moment. During one therapy session, one of the twins took her very first steps. Clumsy, unsteady, but steps nonetheless. The room filled with tears and applause as the physical therapist clapped and the parents cried with joy. Minutes later, her sister followed, wobbling but determined. It was a moment that erased months of fear in an instant. The dream of independence was no longer distant. It was beginning to unfold before their eyes. The parents knew they could not do this alone. With the world watching, they shared another message online, asking for continued prayers and support. Once again, the internet exploded with love. Families from across the globe shared videos of encouragement, children sent handmade cards, and even celebrities posted messages cheering the twins on. The family felt carried by a wave of hope that never seemed to end. But just when life seemed to be moving forward, an unexpected complication threatened to undo everything. One of the twins fell seriously ill, and doctors warned that her condition could spiral quickly. The parents once again found themselves at the hospital, staring at machines, praying through tears, and asking themselves the same terrifying question. After all this, could they lose her now? Stay with us, because in the next chapter, we reveal the most critical turning point in the twins' journey, one that will test not just their strength, but the faith of everyone who had believed in their miracle. The hospital room once again became the center of the family's world. Machines beeped steadily, doctors whispered urgently, and the parents clung to each other with the same fear they had felt on the day of the surgery. Her daughter's condition was critical, her tiny body struggling to fight an infection that had taken hold. After all they had been through, the thought of losing her now was unbearable. The mother sat at her bedside, stroking her hair, whispering prayers through tears. The father held his sister's hand, promising his daughters that he would never give up on them. For days, the outcome hung in the balance. Doctors fought with everything they had, adjusting treatments, running tests, and refusing to surrender. Around the world, millions of strangers joined the battle in spirit, sending prayers, sharing the story, and flooding social media with messages of hope. Candlelight vigils were held in multiple countries. Families lit candles in their windows. People of all faiths came together in unity, refusing to let this miracle slip away. And then, just when it seemed the darkest, the miracle happened again. Slowly, her condition began to improve. First, her fever broke. Then her breathing steadied, and finally, after what felt like an eternity, her tiny eyes opened once more. The room erupted in tears of joy. Nurses embraced each other, doctors sighed in relief, and the parents wept uncontrollably. She had pulled through. Against the odds, the miracle had not ended. It had only grown stronger. Weeks later, the twins were back home. This time, their laughter filled every corner of the house. Their scars were still visible, but so was their resilience. Each day, they grew stronger, taking wobbly steps, giggling at toys, and learning to live as individuals. Their parents often stood in the doorway, watching them play, their hearts overflowing with gratitude. They had prayed for survival, but what they received was something even greater, a chance at a future filled with endless possibilities. The story of these two little girls spread far beyond medicine. It became a symbol of human resilience, of love that refuses to quit, of faith that doesn't bow to fear. Families facing impossible challenges drew strength from it. Doctors were reminded why they had chosen their profession. Strangers discovered hope in their own struggles. The twins' lives had touched millions, proving that miracles are not confined to the pages of books or the walls of churches. They are alive in the courage of the human spirit. Months later, the family returned to the hospital for a follow-up visit. This time, there were no tears of fear, only smiles of gratitude. The same doctors who had once doubted the surgery now watched in awe as the twins toddled into the room, hand in hand, giggling. The parents looked at the medical team and whispered, "Thank you for giving us this gift." The doctors replied with tears in their eyes, knowing they had been part of something extraordinary. Before we close this chapter, we want to ask you, if this story has moved you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that miracles are real. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that inspire hope and courage. As the twins ran into the sunlight outside the hospital, their laughter echoing in the air, it was clear that their story was not just about survival. It was about rewriting destiny. They had been born into a world that doubted them, but they emerged as living proof that no battle is too great when love, courage, and faith are stronger than fear. Their future had been rewritten, and their story would live on forever as one of the greatest miracles ever witnessed.